All right, Uzair, welcome to the No University podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself to the people that are on the podcast right now and that are listening in as we speak?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to get this going and talk about, what I'm working on. So, I run a company called Esports How. We initially started off as a blog, funny enough, because to take it a step back, I started my journey. I work within the esport and gaming industry. In fact, when I first was entering into college, my dream was to get a job in this industry no matter what. And it's extremely difficult, and we can talk more about that because it relates to what I'm doing now. But essentially, I was like, I need to do whatever it takes to get a job. And I did a ton of stuff. I volunteered at like a dozen esport organizations. I ran a bunch of different startups. I was involved as an intern for like three different companies. Like I tried to do a ton of stuff. And one of the things that ended up really playing out was Esports How, which started off as a blog and ended up actually taking off during COVID, which ended up turning it into a B2B consultancy where we worked with nonprofits to help them implement esports and gaming infrastructure into their companies. After I did a little bit of that, that was fun while I had the chance. And then I ended up repurposing the assets that we already had with this company to now focus on what we're currently doing, which is helping people that are looking to get a job in the business side of the esports and gaming industry by helping them use what we call one out of one application strategies.
Nice, nice. And before the whole esports thing, did you always like as a kid, right? Did you always want to do esports or like what was it like growing up? Did you wanted to do this route? Did you always want to be someone
Mm-hmm.
like a business person? Did you want to become a doctor or whatever? Because we're kind of like I don't know about you, but I have family like myself and probably people that are listening in, they
Yeah.
like in the Asian side of things that they wanted their kid to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. Did you have
That's
that
it.
type of thing growing up?
Well, definitely had. Well, first off, I didn't even know esports existed as an industry. And gaming never crossed my mind as an industry to get into. My I didn't really know up until high school, where then I wanted to get into computer science. That was the entire idea. And I ended up drifting away from that path when I started attending. I don't know if you know what hackathons are.
Yeah, I know what they are.
Yeah, so for those who are listening, basically it's events where a bunch of people come in, usually in person, to a venue where they stay anywhere between 12 to up to sometimes 48 hours, or even longer than that, 3 4 days, where then you're just at the venue the entire time, just working on a project. And the last hackathon I went to, I didn't write a single line of code because my team was so far ahead of me. That was a really big discouraging point at that point. Honestly, it should have been a great reflection point to realize I need to sharpen my skills, but I used that as saying, okay, maybe I don't want to get into computer science. And then eventually through the stuff I was doing on the side, because at the same time I was running an esport club, because basically I wanted to run tournaments. No one was running them. I ended up starting them myself. A bunch of people within different high schools reached out and said, hey, we want to join this tournament. I ended up turning that into a student run organization. So that was my first understanding of what esports was. And then eventually from there, I didn't really know the industry at that point, but then I came across this program called the Esport Entrepreneurship and Administration Program. It was the first esport business program in North America. It was like literally 2 hours away from where I was based. So I'm like, let's give it a shot. Join that program. And then from that point, I realized, okay, I want to try to get into this industry no matter what.
Okay. And did that love of like starting at the esports thing come from playing video games or does that have anything to do with that at all? Just want to know because a lot of people now they play video games all the time and they don't I guess they don't open their eyes to the opportunities like this.
Yeah, 100%. It definitely came from playing video games. Again, I didn't know esports was even an industry at the time. All I knew was that I like playing League of Legends and I want to
Hmm.
run tournaments. And I started running tournaments. And then people started liking the tournaments. And then, especially if you think about where I was kind of coming from at that point, where like I already did I don't remember where it kind of fit into the timeline, but I know the hackathon was a really big discouraging point for me. Like, I can't do this, but I was running these tournaments and people loved it. So it was kind of like a feeding cycle into itself. And that's what really got me excited to pursue this route. But yeah, gaming led me into it. It's not the thing that's kept me here.
Yeah.
It's definitely been more the culture, but it was a big gateway drug that it is for a lot of people.
Yeah, I like that. It's a gateway drug. And um do you recommend since you're already a graduate, I'm guessing you're a graduate from college.
Mhm.
Would you recommend college for some of those? Like looking back now, do you think college was worth it, or do you think it was kind of like a thing that you thought at the time? It's like, yeah, I'll go ahead and try it out or do it. Like, what's your opinion on that?
I'm going to college to get into esports and gaming.
Or like just going to college in general, or like your mindset towards college now. Just
Yeah,
your own opinion.
it's a great question. I am definitely of the mindset of it really depends on who you are and kind of where you're at, as well as what you're doing, right? Like there's very obviously, like if you want to be a scientist, you definitely kind of need to go to college to be able to get into that more academic fields. If you're looking at more broad business or general fields, it also really depends. I've had this conversation before and I've leaned sometimes more towards, people just shouldn't go. But I think to be fair, certain people are at different points in their professional life where going to college can be of benefit. And it also gives you more what I call perceived value in the marketplace, where if you just have that, it showcases a better understanding of that material, and that the fact that people just generally speaking that go to college tend to just be better people, not necessarily because they went to college, but because people that are better in high school, better is not the right word, but like higher in terms of what they can do, just end up going down that route. So I do think it's situational based on who you are and where you're currently at. But I definitely am not in favor of it.
Yeah. Okay. And like after high school or like oh no, after college or during college, like what caused you to expand your esports business in a way?
Yeah. So college, it was a great opportunity because when I joined, I didn't know esports existed. So the material that they gave us, especially in that first semester, that was probably the only really valuable semester. The rest of them kind of were a waste of time. There was a few classes that really gave you a high level of like, okay, this is what the industry is. This is the metrics. These are the sources that you can read into, like Newzoo, for example. This is the overall like 80-20 of the scene. That was huge for me to really get that understanding. And then from there, when I was in high school, like I started up 3 clubs and I was a president of 5 collectively. When I went to university, I did the same thing where I ended up started 2 different, actually no, I was the president of 2 of them. They were both pre-established, but then using those clubs as a way to then build up my experience as a tournament organizer, as well as some of the relationships I had there to build up a company. Essentially, the idea was at the time to build up a company that runs tournaments. A little that I know how that economic model works now and the difficulties within that field, and we can obviously get into that as well if you're interested. But long story short, it didn't work out, but it was a really great sandbox and a lot of great knowledge that came to me just being in proximity to people that were all interested in that field.
Yeah, I like that you use basically your other clubs as, like you said, a sandbox to play it around, see what works, see what doesn't work, and then now you cause your main thing, your esports, to be growing and growing. And now you're working towards like hiring people. Like, what exactly now do you do in your esports thing? Like, how do you what the people that you sell to, or the people that are buying whatever you're trying to do, what is that exactly?
Yeah. So when I was in college, I was again coming into this not knowing what esports was, not really understanding the battle I was getting into. But really quickly, once I was in the program, I realized I'm fighting an uphill battle.
Hmm.
Despite the fact that this is the first ever program for this industry, the industry is extremely competitive. It's not as well established. Granted, there's a lot of investment money coming in, but being an entertainment based industry, it is very competitive because a lot of people like it. They really want to get in, and this program itself wasn't established. And as we later realized, it was also very broad. It didn't really build any technical specialities, and we didn't really have any great relationships. So going into it, I knew that I had to do something in order to actually get a job, and I had to work my way to it, which is why I ended up doing all the stuff I did, including the blog article. But during that time, I was extremely stressed and worried, and I didn't really know, okay, what is the right path to end up getting this job? All I knew was that I got to do a bunch of stuff. Looking back, I wasted a lot of time. So, for example, when I was running these tournaments, we would run weekly tournaments, and every week I'm like, okay, I'm moving forward, I'm making progress, I'm going towards my dream of getting a job in esports. Little did I realize those repetitive actions didn't actually bring me any closer to my goal. Right. And then after graduating, this was the real kicker. I was part of the second cohort of our program. in our first cohort, to my knowledge, there's only, I believe there's around 30 students or so that graduated. Only one of them got a job in the esports and gaming industry after that. And of the second cohort, I was the only student that ended up getting a job in the program. And then I look back and why, and I was kind of trying to understand, why was I able to get a job when other people weren't? And at the same time, why was it so difficult? And if we wanted to help other people get a job, what could we possibly do? And that's kind of led me down that journey where I actually declined the job offer I got. It was my dream job. In fact, I look back and I wonder, man, I could have been working within that esports team and kind of living my dream life in that sense. But I ended up taking a different route and deciding, okay, I want to try to figure this out. And I tried a few different things. We started off with trying to figure out, okay, what is the problem that people ran into? Maybe it's technical skills. I tried to start up a boot camp, realize how difficult that was, and also the fact that there wasn't enough product market fit. The problem isn't, and I realized this through having conversations, that people don't have technical abilities. Most people don't have the technical abilities on the entry level side. There are a portion that do, and those portion of people are competing amongst themselves. And then I eventually realized, okay, how do we help those people that are really trying to go above and beyond actually secure the opportunities that they have? And then I started exploring and realizing that there's like three key ways that you can get a job within and get noticed within this industry. And this is definitely largely based off of, and I was refined after I came across this book, but I initially started realizing this myself. I know you've read The Third Door by
Hmm.
Alex Bernine. Yeah,
That's a
so
great
really
book.
100%. So to frame this in some context, Evil Geniuses, which is an evil esports team, in I believe it was February or March of 2022, they had an internship opened up for only people based in the US. They had to be a student. They had it open for about 2 weeks. And they didn't do much advertising. I think they posted on like one or two job boards and they had it on their own socials. They had about 1,400 applicants within that job. On average, companies are usually looking at around 100 to 200 applicants for an opportunity. And this was an internship, and it was very limited in the scope, right? You had to be based in the US, you had to be a student, and they didn't do much promotion. So of those, if you could imagine, like let's say they took 30 to 50 people in an interview, right? I mean, that's even generous to say that many people move forward in interviews. You really had to be a top 1% applicant to actually move forward if you're just basing it off of your experience in paper, right? That was one area. And then I started noticing as well as I got into conversations that, and this is how I got my job, which was the network and the relationships I had. And in fact, that's what everyone tells you is like the best way to get a job is through networking. But like, how do you really establish that? And how do you go about that, especially when you're actively looking for a job? And then I came across a third way that was really, really interesting. In fact, this actually first came to me when I watched a YouTube channel called Yes Theory. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, this was an episode where Alex Bernine was there. I didn't really appreciate what he was doing in the video at the time or his book, but it was about this kid named Ivan Yee, and he wanted to work at an esports team called 100 Thieves. And the entire idea behind the thing was, how do we get into the team? Like, we have to get in front of the right person and showcase that I'm really someone that they should invest the effort and resources in. He ended up creating a video resume. If you're ever interested in checking it out, highly recommend you Google it. It's really well done. And the idea is he wanted to stand out in front of the applicant. And then at first when I watched that, I was like, okay, this is cool, but it's not like something you could really do. I mean, Yes Theory made most of the video and whatnot, and it kind of shoved it off. And this was even before I built the bootcamp idea. Then later I came across a few other people that applied to 100 TSM, which is another esports team, using a slide deck to showcase why they should be expanding into the Brazilian market. This is what this one person ended up actually getting the job, and the hiring manager saying this was a huge reason why. And then I came across this other stuff. I don't know if you've heard of I think it was the Google res. Oh no, not the Spotify resume. Have you ever heard of the Spotify
No.
resume?
What is a Spotify resume? I heard a Harvard resume and never Spotify resume.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the Harvard resume you're talking about is, but I'm sure it's widely different from what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
So basically, there's this girl who wanted to get a job at Spotify. From my understanding of the story, she applied a few times, never heard back. And at one point, she just randomly decided, what if I make my resume look like the user interface of their software, of Spotify? So her resume was formatted, and you can Google this and find it. As that, she ended up submitting it to the company. I guess someone at the company shared it. It went viral. She ended up getting the interview, and I believe she ended up getting the job.
Wow.
And then that was repeated by another guy who ended up doing a resume that was based on Google and Google search. So it's like literally searching up his name. The results were his experience and whatnot. And there's a few people that did this. And then I came across more and more of these examples. Another one at Riot Games where someone ended up, this is super interesting. He ended up applying to the job by putting his resume on a pizza box, shipping it off to Riot Games. Riot Games is like the company to work for within esports and gaming. He ended up getting called in for like half a day. From my understanding, if I remember correctly, he was really underexperienced. He never ended up getting a job or anything, but they literally called him to the office. And all he did was he took his resume, put it on a pizza box, and had that pizza box delivered to the company. Right. So it's like these small things that go really above and beyond. And when I started appreciating that, I started thinking, okay, how do you leverage this as someone who's looking to get a job, using strategy and actually applying in ways that others aren't to stand out? And again, coming back to this, instead of being 1 out of 1,400 applicants, being 1 out of 1, you're competing really against yourself at that point.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's you say that's small, but in my way, like that's very huge in a way because now you're being creative. Like I wouldn't have thought, oh, let me just mail, or not mail, like let me just send a pizza box or something as a gift to this company, and they're gonna have to read my because they look at it. So you're saying for those that does that apply to not just esports but any other job that's around the world? Like I guess most people are looking to work for like a either Google, Amazon, or whatever, like something that pays over around 6 figures or a good amount. What would you recommend for those that are like that you experience teaching your people to get these types of jobs and getting these jobs? Like what do you have to do in the interview or like before the interview? What do you have to do to get that job?
Yeah. So there's a few things that I could say about this. First off, it definitely depends on the technicalities around the job you're applying to. But really, when I frame it, there's like 3 key things you're trying to do when it comes to applying to jobs. First, you're addressing 3 key areas. First is your ability to actually do the job functionally, right? This is the number one thing. If you can't do this, if you can't pass this part of it, then there's no way you're going to move forward, right? You have to be able to actually fulfill the services that the company's looking to hire for. Like if I know you're going to do data entry and I know you're going to work with XYZ software, if you can't do that, you're just not someone who's qualified. But then eventually you come to a pool of people that are, and then it comes to the second key area, which is upside potential. How much more business value can you bring to the table? How much better can you be than the other applicants? How much more do you bring to meetings, to the ability to build out this infrastructure, any procedures and documentation, anything along those lines that can make you a better applicant than everyone else? That's the second key area. And then the third area that is really well documented in terms of its importance is cultural fit and likability. Right. And this is where a strategic application approach, you have to fulfill the first area, which is you have to be able to do the job. But once you can do that by showcasing you're someone who can go above and beyond, who can think critically and be someone who's smart, as well as build rapport through the actions that you take. So, for example, if you applied through a strategic way where you wrote a really well email, and we've done this a few times where we wrote emails to recruiters and people within companies, CEOs, and they just really, really understand the person, really showcases you research them and you really like what they've done, that plays on their heartstrings, makes them a lot more likely to want to further the relationship with you, get them excited and have a bias towards you coming into this interview, that you're someone that they want to have a conversation with. Right. So that's how, even if, for example, you're looking to apply to Google, if you know who the recruiter is for a specific role, or if you know who the hiring manager is, you can utilize that to then circumvent the current infrastructures that they have. You still have to fit in their requirements, but then you're able to take a strategic advantage, right? Like even one client that I'm working with right now, he's applying to NVIDIA, and we ended up just reaching out to a few people to hunt out the hiring manager and recruiter, and we've got a full email that we're setting up with them. But at the same time, because we did that outreach, we're also now in the referral program for something he wasn't otherwise going to be referred to, right? So it does play a role. You just have to know that you have to be able to functionally do the job, but then to showcase you're someone who is above and beyond. That is how you can utilize some of these tactics to help you secure those.
Okay. And in these like emails that you send out, do you try to sound as much professional that you can, or do you try to be more creative, or do you try to be like show that you're kind of like a problem solver? Like, what do you show in those emails that kind of like is like attractive? Because for me, like I kind of like professionalism. So if they write me like a really good, like, like whatever it is, if I were, I'm trying to think of it me as a boss, if someone sent me an email like, oh, it's all uh professionalized, they said D or whatever, and then they sent their resumes, they labeled everything right. They didn't just attach a file that says XYT, they did everything right. So
Yeah.
what do you do in those emails that you send out to those like hiring managers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we definitely don't go the dear professional route. Like that is way too boring. And the thing is, you have to remember who these people are and the position that they're in. They get these emails all the time. They get these messages um, all the time, and they're really boring. They don't really care. They're gonna shove it off. They're gonna see it, especially if you think about more how cover letters are set up. If you think about that sort of professionalism within there is an attention to detail element that is very key, as you mentioned, in relation to your resume, in relation to the supporting documents, and also had the professionalism that comes within the spirit of the email and the way it's formulated.
Mhm.
But it has to really be something that gets their attention and gets them excited to continue to read. If your first sentence is something that bores me or isn't something that's of interest to further reading the entire paragraph, they're not going to read the entire paragraph. And if you do the thing that everyone else is doing, which is a lot of people are taking that professional route, you kind of have a pool with, especially in esports, you have kind of two sets of people. You would have one people that are very unprofessional and they're gonna like send you a Twitter message saying, hey, I want to work for your company, how do I apply, right? And then you have these other guys that are sending like these very formal, very like exactly what you mentioned, dear XYZ, I saw your application post. Like it's super boring. What we do is like, how do we take this email based on the company culture? This is huge, understanding what they represent, what they do, as well as the individual, and doing a huge amount of research on the person you're reaching out to, even if they're just a small recruiter within the company, using that to then play off of some of their interests and to showcase that you've really went above and beyond that other applicants didn't do in terms of the research and in terms of any supporting material you have in that email. That's what we do. So playing really playful, adding jokes that relate to the company. So for example, when we sent an email to a company, I'm not going to name the company name, but within that esport team, they had smaller teams that they ended up hiring out. One of those teams was called Imperative, and within that email, we ended up writing along the lines of a joke that was saying, in order to get this team to be the best of the best, because we knew based on the research we've done on their investor webinar that this was what they're currently tackling. Building that up would be something that is imperative. And we're not talking about your esports team, right? Like a subtle joke that really feeds into the story you're trying to tell, but really showcases that the client is someone who has that cunning element to it that's sharp, that bringing in elements from the company culture that other people wouldn't.
I like that because you're passively saying something without, just like blurting it out. It's like, oh, this guy knows detail and now he knows how to put it into use into like a story format. And is there some things that you shouldn't send at all to like some like a hiring manager or anything like from your experience?
That's a good question. Anything you shouldn't be sending. It's You have to be careful about the noise that comes with this too, because there are times where we might write an email out. We've done this a few times, or you throw a ton of stuff in there, and it takes away from the excitement and the quality. Like you have to keep things looser. There's not necessarily anything that I would say that you can send that would be a no. No, it kind of also depends, and this is something I always talk about with this strategy too, is that by doing this, you are automatically playing aggressively and you're automatically disqualifying yourself from a certain number of applications. So, for example, when you apply to, actually, I have an example where I did this when I was working as a consultant, where we were, I think it was EA or I think it was EA. I don't remember the exact company. It was EA or maybe it was 2K. But nevertheless, we reached out to an individual and they weren't getting back to us in relation to getting some stuff set up for some codes. And then we utilized some of the research we've done on the individual to then put that in an outreach email that we sent to them. And they took offense to that because we found it on their Twitter. And then they ended up privating their Twitter and they blacklisted us. And we were working with some of their content creators, like people that they had under contract. They talked to those guys and they dropped out from the project before we finalized any contracts or whatnot. So it really kind of hurt us. But at the
Well,
same token, if you don't take an aggressive approach, if you're applying, the typical way, you won't you might not offend anyone, but you're also not going to really stand out to anyone. So in that same token, you have to be a little careful and be aware that, okay, by doing this stuff, like having a resume that looks like, let's say you had a resume that looked like Spotify, if it went to the wrong recruiter, they'd be like, why is this an art project? Right.
Yeah.
I don't like this.
I like that because kind of like how Trump did his like political like turns, like basically he's like
Don't relate our projects to Trump.
no, I'm good. But it's like he basically makes the other team hate him more so that his team could love him more in a way, right? So for you, you're basically saying like you should go full out, be more creative, do all this, and some people they may not like it, but some people they will love it, and those are the people that you want to be with because, uh, or if you went to the route where you're just sending regular, D or whatever to each one of them, you're never gonna get hired. So
Exactly.
it's either you never get hired or you get hired and you have some companies hating you at the end. But you'll be way better off because now you're actually moving up the scale and towards your goal.
Yeah, 100%. It's a cost benefit analysis, and it's not necessary that by being, a black and white resume that you're not going to get any job. It's just you're not going to put yourself in a position to maximize the opportunities, and really kind of going into the conversation, getting into their hiring process, actually being someone like I'm really looking forward to this guy, unless you are again one of the top 1% of the applicant pool.
Okay. And how are you marketing what you're doing basically what your business is? Are you doing Facebook ads? You doing word of mouth? Like how are you doing this to spread it?
Yeah, so we don't have any direct marketing initiatives. In fact, if you even look at our website, it doesn't really tell you what we do. We do more direct sales. That's our entire funnel where we reach out to people directly, currently on LinkedIn, where we have a funnel set up where we identify which people were most likely to want to move forward with our service. We have a certain criteria list and we pull people out from different sources. We just send out a connection. I have someone that does the conversations, eventually leads them to scheduling a call with me, and then we just do a call and understand the situation that they're in, sell them through that. So basically just cold outreach, and that's their entire sales funnel.
Yeah, and you said we, right? So who's on your team and what do they exactly do?
So we have a few people. I actually just had my other our ops manager leave the company. He's actually leaving at the end of this week. But yeah, he's been involved. For one, he has been involved in the conversations part of that, but he's also helping with the fulfillment of our servicing, as well as making sure we have OM, so operation management, and PM, project management infrastructure within the company. We have a few other contractors from there. I had one guy who's formerly a sales development representative, although he's now more doing stuff attuned to an assistant. I used to have another assistant, which is why he took the role. And then I have someone who, again, title wise, sales manager, although he's doing a bunch of different stuff in relation to sales and less the management, but more the actual day to day. And then we also have an operations coordinator who's been involved in setting up automation within some of our servicing. And our big focus right now is building out more and more of that automation. And then we
Nice.
also have a few volunteers as well.
Okay. And what's your opinion on this? Like, do you hire out the team first, or do you kind of have to learn how it works in a way, and then hire them out because you don't want to be blind? Like, what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, so I can speak to that from our sales funnel. For when we set up our sales funnel for this specific business venture, I've done these type of funnels before, and I've learned a lot. And this time when I set it up, this is the first time we had what we're calling a prospect nurturing element, right? So once we've done the initial outreach, we're nurturing that prospect a little bit and getting them more likely to convert to an actual cold call, right? Because it's a lot harder to get people onto a call when they don't really know what it is, and our service isn't something that is, a service that people typically subscribe to. So I did not actually do that prior. I've never done that part. And I decided I'm going to start this one off by letting someone else do that. It ended up becoming an extremely bumpy, difficult process. And our conversions were always the lowest by far in that area. And our data collection wasn't amazing at the time too. So I didn't really get a clear picture of what was going on. I couldn't really do clear tests. And because I kind of let that run by someone else, it never really got to the point, even now, where it's to the par and the conversion rate that I'd like it to be. Eventually, I have to go back to it. But to come back to your question, in that context, I didn't do that. I didn't do it first. And as a result, we definitely paid the price. It really depends if you have the right person and the right skill set. But even when it comes to hiring in general, you almost always hire someone who's done the job before,
Hmm.
right? Because it's just statistically the greatest indicator of someone who's able to perform well in the job. In fact, Google Oxygen, they had a great report about factors that play into who makes a good hire. One thing that they found is that you can't really identify who is an amazing hire. Like there's no really specific points. Like you can get an estimation, but you can't say immediately based on these factors that this is 100% the best person. But the biggest factor that they noticed was doing the job before. So likewise, if you're hiring someone that doesn't do the job before, you have to do it yourself. Otherwise, unless there's someone who's really a self-starter and someone who can really take that initiative, they're not going to be able to build it out.
Okay. And where are you finding most of your employees at?
Yeah, so it's funny because by prospecting with people that are looking for a job, I'm able to now find people that might not be a good fit for our sales funnel to move forward and actually make a CTA, but they are someone who would be a good fit for actually working within the company. And that's been really advantageous to me because everyone that kind of goes in this funnel, they understand the mission. We obviously have that conversation, and then I'm able to redirect that call. And that way as well, these aren't necessarily people that are looking in, let's say, the right places for a job or actively thinking about a job. A lot of these guys are younger too. So by having those conversations in this more isolated environment that isn't directly related to finding a job, I ended up finding some really solid people that I'm really, really happy with.
Nice. Yeah, you basically put them in the right spot in the bus, and instead of just seating them anywhere, you actually try to figure out where they should go, where should they sit, and then that's when you drive the bus and everything. And
Exactly.
I wanted to know like how you work for Bulldog Mindset, right?
Mhm.
How is that experience working with John and like another big entrepreneur like himself?
Yeah, it's been really, really cool to see the stuff that he does, the way he thinks about different opportunities and how we should pursue it. I mean, he's definitely right now in the process of having a different mindset related to stuff. But at least when I initially joined, like he's been more just focused on the YouTube videos and making, and that's the only project he's taken on. But initially, it was really cool to see whenever an opportunity came up, he was thinking about how do I maximize this to make the most money out of it. In fact, there's one thing that he did that was extremely like I thought it was so intelligent. So within his inbox, the real world, right? Or Hustlers University.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what they teach those guys, at least one of the wings that they have, is to do copywriting and to do cold emailing. And it's very easy to know which ones are from the real world because their cold emails are very much like it's very clear the CTA is all the same. It's the general angle that they're taking is all the same. They try to add different creative elements that don't really relate to the end user at all. It doesn't really like there's so many things I could say about those emails that make them terrible,
Mhm.
but they're super easy to identify. And then what John ended up saying was what we should be doing. This is literally our avatar. We should use these emails, reply to them, and then sell them the Bulldog Mindset membership. So I set that up for a reply. So whenever we get one of those emails, we can automatically reply to that. And he gets about like 5, 6 a day of those guys. So he's just gotten a ton of sales off of that. And whenever there's an opportunity to make some money, he's always thinking about, okay, how do I implement this? Or how can I utilize this burden or opportunity to actually make more money? That was probably the biggest thing that I learned that was really, really cool, as well as a big thing that he was focused on as well, which is not reinventing the wheel, but rather kind of really doing a lot of research and understanding in terms of how the market's currently tackling a problem and then implementing that and then only upon that adapting it to your situation. So like he always says, just look into it, or he doesn't say that verbatim, but he says, look at what the market actually is currently doing. For example, community management based initiatives, right? Like just utilize those best principles and then build upon that.
Yeah, and how do you basically relate back to the market? Is there like, do you use like Google for that? Do you use like what trending or like what's TikTok trending or whatever? How do you actually know where the market's heading?
You mean in relation to what I was saying about the HU emails?
Yeah.
So what I meant by that is when they send out cold emails, they're sending out templated emails that are trying, what they're trying to do is have a really cool, interesting angle to it that makes you interested in furthering a conversation. So what they would do is like, hey, I saw your website. You didn't implement the XYZ super awesome strategy. This thing is going to blow out your channel. We're going to get so many higher conversions. Let me send you a free gift. Just reply to this email saying hell yeah, and let's do it. Like that's the type of angles that they take. The problem with that is when I read that, it's very clear to me that it's cold email. It's very unauthentic, and as a result, it's very unattractive. Like no one wants a cold email. No one wants to be someone that is on the receiving end of a cold email. And I kind of think about cold outreach as like a spectrum. So if you are someone who's sending out cold emails in that way, if someone is desperate for a copywriter or isn't interested as much in terms of, or is interested in hearing what you have to say, they will reply to that. But as the lower echelon of people, you're not going to get someone who's kind of on the fence of it, like this core people that you can kind of persuade by sending out a really cold email, right? But on the other half of it, there's a certain pool of people that we're never going to buy no matter what. So you can spend hours writing an email. So even in our context too, like we could spend hours writing an email to a company about someone trying to apply for a job when they're not hiring for that role and they're not going to spend any money in that. Like it doesn't matter how much time you spend in that email. Right. So there's a balance between how much time you should spend. And like their emails, what they do, it's cold in that sense. Like it's a templated email. So it works really well in a bulk setting, but they do it in a way where they're not sending it out in bulk. So there's like they're using the wrong infrastructure for the wrong tools that they currently have. And when I say relating to the market, like if they can write an email that actually talks about, they actually did research on John, for example, and they actually know the company and they actually identify areas that improve the web page and they like actually base it off of data and the stuff that they can see on the outside, that is very interesting and attractive to a business owner to say, okay, this guy's actually bringing up some good points.
Nice. And when you first got because I know he did a lot of what do you call it, prospecting of who would be the best fit. What exactly did you do in a way that kind of impressed him? Because I know he told me like he was very wowed from your what does that call your interview basically? What did you basically do?
Okay, so before I applied, so he actually didn't end up doing interviews with most of the people because what ended up happening was, I mean, he was traveling soon after he posted that up, so he wasn't going to go through it until afterwards. But I ended up sending out an email, right? Like just typically. And what I did in that email is because I've already been in the community for a while, I've done stuff, I've sent him emails before. I pretty much documented everything I've done in terms of value within that email, showcasing why I would be a great fit for the role. And then by even just sending an email, he only did interviews with people that sent him external emails. And again, because he had a pool of a bunch of people that like a ton of people that applied, and he wasn't going to go through them until afterwards. But because the people that send him emails and he's going to zero inbox it, he ended up just saying, "Hey, let's do an interview." Before the interview started, what I realized is that okay, I want to stand out. And the best thing I can do is bring ideas and proposals to the actual call. So what I ended up doing was I ended up interviewing, I think about 15 people in the membership and then pulling out a bunch of information in terms of and asking them a bunch of questions so that I had information to base it off of. So and during the call, I can say I've interviewed 15 people. This is what they said. This is what I've noticed. This is stuff that we can implement. This is our short-term strategy, our kind of long-term strategy, as well as I was the only person that ended up actually dressing well for the interview and kind of being prepared in that sense. But it's really the interviews that I did there that really wowed him to want to actually just close out on me because he said just taking that initiative alone told him enough that, I don't even need to talk to anyone else because I know if you're this is what you're going to do before the interview, I'm excited to just get this started with you. So that was the key things that I implemented during that.
Nice. I like that. And anything else that you recommend for somebody that's like they're preparing to go to an interview, they're trying to do something. What else would you recommend for them?
I think a lot of the game can be played before you go into the interview, and the more you can play before going in, the better. What I mean by that is even before you secure the interview or while you're in the process of doing it, sending out like that basic email showcasing you really understand the person and get them excited about your call is a huge, and I've known this too because I've done a bunch of hiring just for our own stuff, both within actual contractor roles, but also interns because we've gotten a lot of grant access for within the Canadian government to hire interns. So I've done a lot of interviews, and there's a very stark difference between an interview I have with someone that I'm excited to have a conversation with because I just know based on either their resume or the fact of what they've done already in our Discord server, and the interactions that we already had that really give them an unfair advantage. So anything you can do in terms of that, like showcasing you have additional value that you can bring to the table. Again, like what I did, especially this works better with smaller companies. If you can showcase you're going to be a self-starter, you're going to take that initiative, that you're already someone who's not just saying this, because a lot of people can say I'm a self-starter, I take initiative, like actually showcasing it actively with this company, that'll best set you up. And then obviously being aware, and a lot of people don't ask enough questions. Like you can just ask the recruiter, what interview is this, right? I've had a number of people, like we don't tell them is it personality based, is it technical based, what is the format? A lot of people just a number of people reach out and just ask. Yeah, very very few, but they still ask, and that stuff like that really helps them better prepare. And then obviously knowing, and I'm more than happy to give a bunch of information, asking for feedback at the end of it, as well, having good questions prepared, having a good background prepared as well. I think it's pretty big, especially when you're applying virtually, especially for personality based interviews. Those are some of the key things I'd say. But outside of that, you just really have to know how to address the questions to the best of your ability. But more so, our focus is how do we set it up in a way where they're super excited about this and we only have to pass the technical parts of it.
I like that. I like that it's kind of like a lot of showing and tell instead of telling, right? You're like, hey, like pulling up all the questions or doing all the ideas that you thought of and just dressing up for it as well is like shows your commitment to the actual team. That's very impressive. I'll say that. And now we can move on to the ending questions here. So, if you can go back in time and tell your younger self something, what would it be?
That's an interesting question because I'm not too old. But what I what I would do, yeah, what I this is hard because I've made a lot of mistakes. Hmm. Yeah, there's a few things I might tell myself. I'm just trying to see where I would stop. If anything, I wish, actually, yeah, okay. When I was in high school, I mean, I was working on a hackathon event, and this was a catalyst for a lot of what I ended up doing. Like, this is the first really big project I ended up taking on. It never ended up playing out for a number of reasons, but it was by far my greatest learning thing that I've done to this day. By far, the only thing I wish for that, I wish I actually executed the event, and I wish I focused on learning and taking more feedback cycles. And that was probably the biggest thing. And even throughout my career afterwards, and hell, even now, I could probably say this is taking more feedback cycles, and just learning more, getting more wisdom from people that know the stuff, and having them actually see and showcase, or even people that, I'm directly working with, employees, volunteers, getting more inputs on where I can improve, where I can do better. But even like I was talking to someone, I did a coaching call with them, and he was doing blogging. And at this point in time, he was getting around, I think, 100 page views per month. And he should have been, like, at this point, at least 5,000 at the very least per month. And the big thing I noticed, he made a bunch of mistakes, but I told him, what you need to do is just every day spend like 30 minutes watching some of the content on people and what the industries, like how are people actually building out their blogs. And that's going to be such a huge thing that I wish I did more, which I invent the wheel a lot. I don't really do much research, which is partly why, again, John was saying, you got to just focus on looking at what the market does, taking that and then adapting it to your situation. A long-winded answer, but yeah, definitely more feedback cycles.
I like that because I know I made a crap ton of mistakes, right? But I never took the chance to like dig deep dive and like analyze and be like, oh, what could I have done better, or how can I not do this again in the future? But as a kid, you're like, oh, I probably won't do it again. And then your brain, again, is not meant for storage, is meant for ideas. So you won't remember probably like how you did that or how you failed that. But like if it's like really painful, like touching fire, you're gonna remember that. But if small things like, oh, why was my blog not being successful? Instead of analyzing, you're like, let me just keep on making more, right? Let me just like it's like throwing shit on the wall, right? Eventually one it's gonna stick, but you just don't know why it's not sticking. It gets to that point.
Yeah,
And go ahead.
In fact, Benjamin Hardy, I forgot who he got this from, but I heard this from him. He has a great quote about this, where something along the lines of life has a funny habit of teaching teaching you lessons that you won't learn until you learn them. I don't remember exactly what it is, but you'll keep running. You can't make it to the next level until you understand and actually learn the lesson that life was trying to teach you, whether it be like an example when I was in that situation, being a micromanager or you know, not working hard enough, or like whatever that lesson is that you need to learn to move to that next level. If you don't learn it, you're just going to keep revisiting it until you do.
That's very funny because I just keep picturing in my head someone just running to a wall until like life just keeps on putting bricks right in front of them until he figures out, wait, I should probably stop doing that, probably climb over the wall. Something like that. That's what I'm picturing in my head. And like, is there anything that you would like to ask your future self? Let's say like 10 to 20 years later.
That's my future self. Damn, you're asking all the hard questions now.
Oh,
Let me see. What would I ask my future self? I mean, I would ask where I'm at right now. What is the answer to some of the lottery? What are the lottery ticket numbers? But joking aside, I don't know. I don't know what I'd ask myself. Yeah, I have no idea.
so
I had no questions.
so if your future self was just right there sitting, right? He's like right in front of you, he's like, hey, just ask me anything you want. Can't be anything about money, can't be anything about Bitcoin, nothing about that. What do you want to know about?
I mean, I want to know where I'm at. I'd love to know what I should prepare for sure. In
Okay.
terms of like what's coming on the horizon that I should probably have for to ease up some of the potential problems that I might run into. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, those would probably be the two key things. Like, I'm just curious about what's going on, and also what can I do to prepare for myself. But outside of that, I don't know what else I could do to benefit from that conversation.
Nice. Okay. And what do you think the secret sauce is into becoming very successful?
If I had that, I'd be very successful right now. But what I would say is 1,000%, it's not how hard you work, but it is what you do, right? And how you do it. I think strategy is by far the most important part of this entire process that I'm really appreciating through the work that we're doing. Because I mean, again, coming back to the Riot Games pizza box example, it's not a lot of work to put your resume on a pizza box, and then get that shipped out to the office. All you have to do is literally print out your paper, order a pizza, and just put it on top of that box,
Yeah,
right? But at the same token, the benefits that that guy received, or putting a resume as a like Spotify resume, like there's a lot of different things that you could be doing. And same thing kind of comes to business. It's like you could be running into, like you talked about, running into the wall, or you could just be climbing over the wall, right? And it's, in order to get the end output, there's multiple things that you can do, and it's not really a hard you work, although working hard is definitely a benefactor and something that can accelerate you. It is all about what you do, and that's the key to everything. Is really, I think it's Einstein that said, if I had a problem, I'd spend, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 50 minutes thinking about the problem and 10 minutes solving the problem.
I think he stole that from Lincoln. Like,
Maybe.
if he had an axe, he'll spend like 80 minutes or however long, 2 hours sharpening it, and then 20 minutes actually swinging it.
Well, that this one is specifically related to understanding the problem that you're solving, right? Like,
Yeah,
just not like again, you're trying to get over the wall. You're gonna run into the wall, right? Like, you could work, like what you're saying is more working on your ability to be able to get from A, point A to point B.
true,
What
true.
what Einstein's quote was specifically understanding what does it mean to get to point B, right? Like, what is this entire problem? What is the context? What are the options that I have here?
Nice. Okay. And is there a quote that you live by, or that you think of?
Quote that I live by. There's a number of quotes that I think of. I think if you're asking me for my favorite quote, because
Yeah,
that's one I can easily address, it is it's definitely one of Marcus Aurelius's quote. I think this one is has been such a great reminder, especially when I'm trying to do work and it's like, oh, I don't want to do work. It's begin. To begin is half the work, let half still remain, then begin this, and that will be finished. This is such a there's a lot of great Marcus Aurelius quotes. I love. Same thing with Seneca, but that one is by far an extremely valuable one when you just remind yourself that you just got to start and then once you start, that's already half the battle.
Wow, I love it's like him waking up in the bed. Like if you just get up, you can get your day started. Again, you literally beat the monster that's holding you in.
Yeah,
I like
or it's
that
like
quote.
you want to write a book and you're like, oh, I'm thinking about it, I want to start, and you just start, and the moment you start, that's like half of that journey
Yeah,
right there.
you go through that flow state afterwards. I mean,
Exactly.
and then is there any books that you would recommend for certain situations or parts of your life that you wish you had uh, that you would recommend to people?
There's a lot of great books. I wish I read Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less earlier, because as I talked about, the big mistake I made is that I did a ton of stuff and I didn't really focus on the things that are going to move the needle forward
Hmm.
in terms of what my goal actually was. That's by far, if you haven't read that book, I mean, I've already told you to read that book
Hmm.
a few times, but for everyone else that's listening, highly recommend that book. That was a really amazing book. I think on the shortness of life, that book was really eye opening, especially in relation to. I think one of the things that I really took away from that was knowledge and mental masturbation in terms of the knowledge that we take and realizing the lack of utility to it. In fact, I remember at the time, or at least what he was writing, was about Roman Romans like thinking about, who's the first, I don't know, first female president, let's just say, right? Like getting obsessed over details like this, or what date did this happen, who was the first person to did XYZ, like information that isn't relevant to you that you can action upon isn't information that is worth knowing. It's pretty much the consensus, which I thought was mindset shifting for sure. That one is huge. I really liked um Meditations. That was really good. And then, oh, Be Your Future Self Now. That's the last book I'd highly recommend. I was, in fact, I could quickly say I was running consistently, and I was running around 8 kilometers every run, which I think is like 6 miles or so. And I couldn't really go beyond that. After I read that book, in fact, when I started reading that book, I was reading it while I was on a run. I went from 8 kilometers consistently, couldn't really exceed that, to running a full marathon 2 weeks later, just
Wow,
because I had no intention in running. In fact, I was planning on running a half marathon in about 4 months or so from that point, and I ran a full marathon just because I read that book. It was such a mind shifter.
okay. And what was that second book? I kind of missed that one. What was that? Shortest Life of what?
Oh, On the Shortness of Life by
Oh,
Seneca.
okay. And Pan said the Essentials in the Discipline. Yes, is that by I think it's Greg McCohen, right?
Yeah, Greg McNowan.
Okay, nice. And is there anything that second to last question is there anything that you would like to tell your mother and father if they were to listen to this podcast?
Oh man, um, I'm really grateful to them, and yeah, I love them. That's it.
Nice. I love that. And finally, how can people reach out to you and what value can they give back to you?
Um, okay, so you can reach me through my email, which is Uzair, the Hasan at esporthow.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, which is obviously my first name, last name. You can find all the stuff on our website, esportshow.com. And in terms of value that they can give me, I mean, just reach out. Let's have a conversation. If you ever have any thoughts in relation to job applications, I'm more than happy to chat.
Nice, nice. And again, Uzair, thank you for coming on to the podcast. You're amazing.
Awesome. Thanks for having. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.